Thank you for, I'll just be a little official. Thank you for that conversation around gender and the challenges around our comprehension and how we understand what gender is. And one thing that came to mind was just why is it so, what is so difficult for people to understand around pronoun use and that shift? Is it just about the changing, that it's something in that, we all have difficulty changing. So changing something we've learned, or is it something else?
That's a great question, Sarah. I think that in general, change is hard, right? Change is hard. We learn about gender through our whole lives, even before we're born, right? And we can see this in everything from the colors we use for infants' clothing, the kinds of toys we buy, the images we use. So before a child is even born, we're placing expectations around gender on them based on what their biological sex might be. So for example, even in utero, we might say things like, oh, you're carrying a boy. You can tell he's already an athlete in there, moving around so much, right? Or we approach an infant and the parent tells us that this infant is female. And we say, oh, look at that beautiful girl, right? Even though that beautiful girl might look exactly like a beautiful male baby at that age. But we're putting our expectations onto that child about what we think that is. And we have all been raised in that same kind of environment where there is an unspoken understanding that our biological sex leads directly to our gender. And we learn very quickly what the expectations are from our parents, from the people around us, sometimes in really positive ways. What a good girl you are, right? Look at you being a big, strong boy. And sometimes in really negative ways. That's not the way young ladies act. So we get the messages all around us all the time, constantly reinforcing. Even as adults, we get those messages. And we can see the way that so many things in our society are gendered. Inanimate objects are gendered, Sarah. So you might remember a few years ago, Yankee Candle introduced man candles with traditionally what they stated were masculine scents like fresh cut grass. Right. But there's an example where we're assigning gender to an inanimate object, which is a candle, and to scents. So we assign gender to scents and sounds, to drinks, to certain kinds of food, to clothing, to activities. We're constantly gendering the world around us. And it's really difficult to change the way we think about those things, even if we think we might be very enlightened. So again, change is hard. Our brains over time become wired to see things as gendered. So we look at someone and we might take in what they're wearing, their height, the way they stand, the way they move, the length of their hair, and we might start putting characteristics and expectations on them based on those things, those coded things that we've come to learn as ways to communicate about gender. So I think there's a lot of difficulty around that. And I think when we challenge those ideas, it disrupts our understanding of the world, and it also disrupts our understanding of ourselves. So am I choosing my clothes based on what I like, or am I choosing them because that is what's being offered to me in the section that is labeled for my gender? And that's difficult to think about. We all like to think that we have free will. We don't want to think that our interests, our personalities, our style have been predetermined by other people's expectations of us. That's a terrible feeling. Nobody wants to be told you are the way you are because other people told you you should be that way. And I'm oversimplifying it, but I do think that there's a way that really hits us in our core sense of self. So I think that's sort of one thing. I think another thing is that, as I said before, sometimes we get those messages in very negative ways. To behave outside of the expectations of what society says is a natural progression for your biological sex is seen in really negative ways. So, from typical examples, we might see like a boy or a man crying being told to toughen up, often told, man up. Just even the language is saying to them, act like a man, right? Or being told, you're not feminine enough, right? I use the example, sit like a young lady, act like a young lady, right? And sometimes we're being told those things in ways by people who are trying to help us fit in to a world where those things are expected of us. But sometimes those things also come with violence and a rejection around not doing them right. So on another level, some of what may be difficult for us is that on some level, we know the risks of not doing it right. We see it around us, from kids who are bullied in school to adults who might be outcasts in the workplace for not quite fitting in. We feel the pressures of that. So there's a lot of different complicated things happening around us. And then I think there's the piece about language. And, the idea that someone can change their pronoun is difficult for some people to accept. They might think it's a trend or a fad. I've heard people make the argument that they don't want to use the term them or they because it's grammatically incorrect. And I would bring us back to what our larger purpose is. For me as the dean, and I think for us as a university and for us as the Institute for Social Justice, our purpose is to be inclusive. Our purpose is to value all of our members, all of our constituents, all of our students, our colleagues, our community. And if we're valuing all the people in our spaces, then whether they and them was grammatically incorrect is really not important to me. What's important to me is that a person who uses they or them as their pronoun hears me use they or them as their pronoun and knows that I see them and that they matter in this space. Because at the end of the day, we say things that are grammatically incorrect all the time. And language changes all the time. We get new words added to the dictionary all the time. So issues around grammar for me are much less important than issues around recognizing a person's value.